Dina, and
All right. Well, very good. Welcome everybody to today's Measure T Renewal Investment Plan Steering Committee meeting. Today is April 14th, 2022. We have, I'm not sure about the need to, I believe that we can go ahead and just find out the committee members based on who's participating. And so we probably don't need to do a roll call. And so before we get into our first action items, let's go ahead and talk about our protocols.
okay, Dina, if you don't mind going through the protocols, please.
Muy buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos a la reunión. Para esta reunión, el día de hoy vamos a tener interpretación simultánea al español. Para seleccionar interpretación simultánea, en un momento usted va a ver abajo de su pantalla un icono que parece un mundo. Después de que seleccione el icono que parece un mundo, usted va a seleccionar su lenguaje de preferencia, en este caso va a ser español, y después le invito a seleccionar la última opción después del lenguaje, que dice Mute Original Audio o poner el audio original en silencio. De esta manera no escuchará ningún eco aparte de su lenguaje de preferencia. Si usted está usando un celular o una tableta o cualquier otro dispositivo que no es una computadora, sus opciones serán diferentes. Usted seleccionará los 3 puntitos que indican más or more options y de esta manera usted también va a poder seleccionar su lenguaje para interpretación. Una vez más, va a seleccionar español, va a poner el audio original en silencio y de esta manera usted va a poderse unir a la reunión en su lenguaje de preferencia. Le invitamos a someter cualquier pregunta o comentario en su lenguaje por medio de la función del chat y aquí estaremos para ayudar. Gracias. Dina, we can go ahead and turn on interpretation.
Yeah, so we'll wait just for a few minutes, a couple of seconds here to let those who do speak Spanish to move over to the Spanish speaking channel. Thank you, Reina. Okay, so I noticed that Dina is not on today, so I am the protocol person. So microphones will be automatically muted. Video will be off for public attendees. Video will remain off for the public attendees even while speaking. Post general questions in the Q&A box, please. Use the raised hand function to direct a question to the speaker or to the steering committee. For attendees that joined by phone, *9 is the raise hand function. Phone callers, please use *6 to unmute and mute yourself, not the mute function on your phone. There will be a public comment period at the end of the agenda. If you plan to comment, add your name, agency, and subject matter to the Q&A box. When called upon to speak, staff will unmute your microphone, state your name, agency, organization, or special interest group, if applicable. All speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. Staff will announce when your time is up and disable your microphone when your time is up. There are 2 opportunities for public comment during today's steering committee meeting, one at the beginning of the meeting, public comment related to items on the agenda, and one at the end of the meeting, public comment related to items not on the agenda. If you have comments related to specific projects within neighborhoods of communities, such as desiring a roundabout at an intersection or the extension of transit service in the city of Madera or Chowchilla, please direct your comment to the city of Madera or Chowchilla staff. If the project is outside of the 2 cities, please direct your comments to county staff. MCTC, working on the ARC Regional Transportation Plan, will also accept project-specific comments and forward the comment to the responsible agency. The steering committee will be addressing major regional transportation projects along state routes and other major arterials that connect cities and unincorporated communities, not specific project needs. The steering committee is a working group responsible for development of the Measure T Renewal Investment Plan and represents the public at large. The steering committee will ultimately recommend approval of the plan to the Madera County Transportation Authority. It is the MCTA board that will take action to approve the plan and request that the Board of Supervisors place the ballot measure on the November 2022 ballot. So with that, this is the agenda, and I'll turn it back over to Supervisor Poitras.
Very good. Thank you, Georgina. Great presentation there regarding meeting protocol. So thank you very much. So the first item, the action item will be the approval of the 2022 meeting minutes for March 17th and March 31st. Are there any comments regarding the minutes? If not, I see there's two hands up. I believe that Madeline's hand was up first. Madeline?
Hi, thank you. One thing I noticed for the March 31st meeting minutes, I remember Mayor Garcia saying that he wished that there were higher allocations for active transportation and public transit in the alternatives for the investment plan that we were looking at the March 31st meeting, and I didn't see that reflected in the minutes. So I wanted to ask that that be added.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, very good. And Mr. Wheeler?
Yes, I had a few items. One was that the steering committee requested additional alternatives and the request was ignored. The steering committee also implicitly requested the maintenance be shown as a separate item. And this is basically ignored. Also, you
Which
might
minutes,
note,
I'm sorry, Mr. Wheeler, which minutes are you referring to?
I believe this is for the last meeting, which I believe was on the 31st. Is that correct?
Okay,
Yes.
March 31st. So we'll add something to that effect.
Okay, and then Supervisor Frazier also made a comment. Perhaps he misunderstood, but it seemed that he was incorrectly implying that an increase in active transportation % allocation would take away from road maintenance. And that is not true.
Well,
Not
First of all,
necessarily true.
I don't think I ever said that.
You said something to the effect that I wouldn't want to take away from road maintenance in order to increase active transportation.
No, we could go back to the recording. I've never said that.
Okay, then I'll leave that at that, and
Well, we'll go back and we'll take a look at it, and then we'll make whatever corrections need to be made.
okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Very good. Any other comments regarding the minutes from March 17th and March 31st? Seeing and hearing none, I'll accept a motion for action.
Jason Rogers.
The
move to
minutes as
approve.
presented.
Okay, I'll second. Jason.
Okay, very good. We have a first and second to approve the minutes with the aforementioned additions.
And that was Jay Varney that made the
Yes,
motion? Okay.
right. So are there any individuals that are in, have a dissenting opinion regarding the approval of these minutes?
I'd like to see the changes that Jeffrey Wheeler and I requested to the minutes before approving. So I would object.
Okay. We have one objection. Any other objections? The motion has passed.
And just for clarification, when you called for that, you said with the changes, correct?
Right, with the aforementioned changes, yeah.
So those were included as part of the motion.
Yes.
Right,
Just point of clarification.
very good. Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor. So let's go ahead and move on to item number 2, public comment related to items on the agenda. All right, I don't see, I see a hand. Go ahead, Ms. Harris.
Thank you. My only comment related to items on the agenda is just that I understand we're going to be looking at some new material today, and I requested the slides hoping that Leticia and I could review those with community residents so that we could give community informed feedback, because I know that's been a point of discussion on our previous steering committee calls, that you like for us to represent what we're hearing from folks, but it's difficult for us to do that if we don't have the materials ahead of time. So I just wanted to ask that these materials be made publicly available ahead of the meetings, to promote, you know, people being able to actually give public comment related to items on the agenda before they're even discussed or shown in these meetings.
All right, very good. Leticia.
Hi, everyone. Leticia with Leadership Council. I had a question about I just want some clarification for the regional project listing. Is that going to overlap with the regional project transportation projects?
The discussion related to the regional program will just be to discuss how we're going to look at what the process will be to identify the regional program and the list of projects that will be addressed in that regional program. We are not submitting a list of projects today. It's just initiating discussion and identifying what a regional project is and the process that we're going to go through to actually develop the list of projects.
Okay. So at some point, I noticed that the MCTC had an update on the RTP. Could that also be addressed? Or could that update also be shared here?
Maybe you could further clarify what you mean.
So on MCTC's website, there's an agenda that they had. It looked like it was a meeting with them. If I remember correctly, it was like a technical sort of meeting. And there was on the list of the agenda, there was an RTP SCS update. So I was just wondering if that update could also be made here, since this the agenda item is closely related to the RTP SCS.
Tricia or Dylan?
Yeah, this is Tricia. If Dylan Stone is available under the other outreach activity status on item 5, he can share with what you know, the outcome or what was discussed in the workshops for the RTP SCS.
All right.
I think she was talking about a technical meeting of your roundtable, maybe? Is that what you're referring to, Leticia? Or are you talking about the workshops for the RTP?
No, it was on their agenda. There wasn't anything about a workshop on there.
So it's your technical committee. Tricia, she's asking about what has occurred at the technical committee for the regional transportation plan, not the workshops.
Okay, and I don't know if Dylan's on to share any of that information. I'm not included in part of that technical committee.
Oh, this is Dylan. I saw that there was a comment just posted. It was the Measure T Technical Advisory Committee. Is this the meeting you're referring to?
I think they're talking about the RTP.
The RTP.
We've had some community engagements that I could share.
Have you had any technical meeting? Have you
In
had
the,
any?
in the technical meeting, there was an agendized item that said RTP SCS update.
What
Well, maybe
date
you're.
are you, I need that
I think
doesn't.
maybe Dylan, she's talking about your TAC.
Back, yeah.
Yeah, she's talking about your
our-
TAC.
Oh, the Technical Advisory Committee meeting?
Yes. That's
Oh,
what it
okay,
is.
yeah. Well, that's, we have a
Same
monthly
thing.
meeting with our agencies where we just make sure that they're aware of what outreach we're doing or any kind of need to know info that's coming up related to things that they could share in their communities or with their communication circles that can help us get better feedback. So that we pretty much have that every month. And that's kind of one of the main things is just making sure that things keep moving and we can take advantage of all these different networks communication that however we can to have people they know participate with us and just any upcoming events that might be happening or a review of past events where we've had a few recently that we could give them a few highlights on As we mentioned during those meetings, we pass along info we usually get from a lot of these efforts, since ultimately they are the implementers of the projects or things that get commented on that need to come to their attention.
Right, yeah, no, for sure. But on the agenda, there was an RTP SES update, and I was just wondering if that update could be shared here.
Definitely.
Thank you.
That was about half of it, but yeah, I could talk a little more about some of the community engagements that have happened.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Hearing and seeing none?
Supervisor.
Yes.
Supervisor Poitras, it looks like there's a hand up on our attendee side right now.
Oh, okay.
See if I can get them.
Okay.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo María García. Estoy trabajando para Centro Nacional para Desarrollo Indígenas Oaxaqueños. He estado haciendo alcance desde el mes de enero de este año y mayoría de la comunidad del Yosemite o por donde está Madera Viejos, ahí necesitan ayuda, mucha ayuda como a añadir más postes de luces, banquetas, a reparar las calles y poner más señales de alto para la seguridad de niños para la escuela. Esa es una. Y la otra es lo que no quiere la comunidad es invertir o que estén invirtiendo los impuestos en freeways, porque a ellos dicen que no les beneficia eso, que ellos en vez de invertir ese dinero en freeways, ellos quieren invertir ese dinero en las calles de aquí de Condado de Madera. Y el otro es que creo que la última junta fue por el 31 de marzo, dijeron que iban a mandar la forma de medida P en español, pero esta vez lo mandaron en inglés. Y mayoría de nuestra comunidad no hablan inglés. Todo.
All right, thank you. We have a message from our interpreter. Raina says it is difficult to hear. Can I have a repeat and have English speakers join interpretation as well to hear the real-time interpretation? Georgina, any comment on that?
I'm sorry, run it by me again, Rob.
Well, yeah, Raina says it's difficult, our interpreter says it's difficult to hear, and she'd like to have a repeat and have English speakers join interpretation as well to hear the real-time interpretation.
Tina, do you have any suggestions?
So has everyone on the English side chosen the English channel? Audio channel?
If we were a panelist at the beginning, would we automatically be moved into that channel, Tina?
No, you actually have to choose, go to the globe and choose English, and then you'll be able to hear Raina from there. Unless she's wanting us to join on the Spanish. Yeah.
Sí, ok. Ha estado haciendo alcance desde el mes de enero de este año y la comunidad de que estaba haciendo alcance.
There we go.
Están diciendo que ocupan la ayuda, ocupan reparar las calles de Yosemite, que es por donde está la Madera Viejos, arreglar más banquetas, a reparar calles, a añadir señales de alto para seguridad de los niños, para la escuela donde está la revista, Millview y por la MK. De ahí quieren que ayuden a arreglar esas calles, y lo que ellos no quieren es invertir los impuestos en reparar o ampliar freeways. Ellos quieren que arreglen en áreas donde ellos viven. Y también para el día 31 de marzo, en el comité el mes pasado dijeron que iban a mandar la forma de majority en español, pero lo mandaron en inglés y la mayoría de las personas aquí en la comunidad no hablan inglés. No sé si es posible que puedan mandar otro en español.
Okay, thanks, Rena.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Is that going to be translated?
Sí, es
Rena
por la
just
East
translated it.
Yosemite.
There
East
was a
Yosemite, toda
question?
la calle Yosemite.
There's a question if that was going to be translated.
Rena did translate it right now. She just gave it to us in English.
Okay,
And so Rena indicated that the person who is giving her information is concerned about streets and maintenance and just, good facilities for walking children. And that she mentioned specific facilities, and Rena was going to find out
Por
exactly
las
which
calles,
streets and
East
roads she was
Yosemite,
talking about.
todo lo que es el área como the Crest,
And
por
she
la
was also
Magnolia.
concerned about the flyer the mailer that was received that was in English. And she'd like to know how to provide her information in Spanish so that she can get her thoughts and ideas to us.
okay. So Reina, you got your hands up. Do you have a comment?
Porcentaje, que quieren un porcentaje más alto para el público.
Okay, so I believe the
Ya, ese es
speaker,
el
we've
porcentaje.
surpassed the 2-minute mark by quite a bit.
Porcentaje más
So
alto para el transporte público.
are there any other public comments? Seeing and hearing none, let's go on
I
to
just
item
wanna-
number.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
Co-chair. She just mentioned that at the end of it, she said that if the flyers can be sent in Spanish, because they were only sent in English, so Spanish speakers and Indigenous speakers cannot understand it. And I think the second thing, she talked about higher percentages, but I didn't really hear her. I wonder if we could ask if she could speak again so we can hear that aspect of it.
I thought you
Okay.
said you
Ya,
just said
disculpen,
that
el
you
micrófono no está
heard
grabando
that,
bien.
so
Ya.
obviously she said it. Why
Yeah,
would we
did you all hear
have her-
it?
Yeah,
So what did she
Ok,
say?
so discúlpeme. Ok, lo que estaba yo diciendo es sobre los porcentajes más altos para el transporte público. Es lo que ellos están pidiendo también. ¿Sí me escucharon?
Okay. Raina, do you have any comments? I see your hand still up. Okay, it's down. Mayor Garcia?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think what she was saying that she wanted higher percentages in public transportation. It was very difficult to hear. I'm not sure if she was on speaker or she was not using speaker, but it was very difficult to hear. So in the future, maybe we can have this discussion regarding the translation so that we can very clearly hear what the message is, and maybe someone could help the speaker with that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay. Very good. If there's no other public comment, let's go ahead and move on to item number 3, the Measure T renewal, staff modal allocation proposal, allocation of sub-programs. Georgina.
Yes, I'll start out and then I'll probably have Troy also provide some information. So at previous meetings, of course, you have seen these slides before. These are the approved programs for Measure T, the Measure T renewal. We have, we have the Community and Neighborhood Streets and Roads program. And under that, we have the Local Neighborhood and Major Streets Maintenance Subprogram, the Local Road Improvement Subprogram, the Flexible Subprogram, which goes to any transportation purpose, and then also the Regional Streets, Roads, and Highways subprogram. We also have the Public Transit program, and we have 3 sub-programs under there for each of the 3 transit providers within the county. Then finally, the last 2 programs are the Active Transportation, Bicycle, Pedestrians, and Trails program. There are no sub-programs under that. And then the same with the Clean Transportation and New Technologies program, no sub-programs. So just an overview of what you've seen before, just to give you a refresher course on what those programs are. You also approved Alternative 2, which provided for 57.5% of the measure to Local Streets and Roads program, which includes maintenance. It includes the local transportation improvements as well as the flexible. And you allocated 30% to the regional facilities, regional streets and roads, 4% to active transportation, 4% to transit, 3% to clean technology, 1.5% to administration planning, for a total of 100%. So I'm going to ask Troy to take us through these tables to provide you with staff's proposed Measure T3 program, sub-program allocations. The only program with sub-programs that need to have this 57.5% allocated to sub-programs would be under the Community and Neighborhood Streets and Roads program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Troy and ask him to go through this year 1 estimate, and then we'll move on to the table, the next table, which will provide us with the 30-year estimate. Troy?
Thanks, Georgina. Just a couple of assumptions that were made to begin with to understand is year 1 is going to be fiscal year 27-28, which will be the first year of the renewal. And we, for analytical purposes, we used 20 million as an estimate of what we would receive that fiscal year. And so part of what I look at is, based upon history and based upon just running numbers, is we want to make sure that we have allocations not so low that the money will just sit there because there's not enough money to deliver any type of projects. And also what we heard based upon feedback is flexibility in delivering what is needed for the community or the jurisdictions for the type of projects that they need. And we also heard the PCI index issues of trying to fix our roads. And so with that being said, what the staff recommendation is to have 30% for the maintenance sub-program, 15% for the local road improvement sub-program, and 2.5% for flexible. What the jurisdictions could do with that flexible is that they could use it for maintenance, they could use it for local road improvements, they could use it for an ATP project, they could use it for a transit project, they could use it for whatever transportation related project within their jurisdiction that they would determine as a need. And so based upon that, the numbers, as you can see on the screen, is about 3 million for the County of Madera for the maintenance, 2.5 million for City of Madera, and about 480 for Chowchilla. And then the 1.5 million under the local road improvements for the county, about 1.2 for City of Madera, and about 240 for Chowchilla. And the flexible would have about 1.2 million, 1 million for City of Madera, and about 200,000 for Chowchilla. Remember, this is for year 1 of the renewal forecasted in fiscal year 27-28. These numbers based upon forecasts would essentially increase every year, more or less, over time. And so we wanted to make sure that in year 1 that we made sure we had a minimum amount that the jurisdictions could actually do something with, whether they used 1-year allocation or used more than 1-year allocation to do a substantive type project that would be needed. What we've seen in past measures is some of the programs have been so low that there's just not enough money to deliver a project. And so the money is not spent, it just is accumulated over time and over years. And that doesn't really help the community if the money just sits there. And so I'm available for any questions.
Do you want to go through the 30-year first, Troy?
That'd be great.
This is the 30-year program.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
So this is the number. I didn't know sorry, I didn't know there's another slide. So we saw the year one. So over 30 years, what would that mean over 30-year time using our projections for the 30 years? And so County Madera, 130 million, 108 million for the city of Madera, and about almost 21 million for city of Chowchilla, 65 million for the county in local road improvements over the 30-year period. These are, I just wanted to clarify, I didn't mention this before, these are all based upon the population percentages at the top of 50.24, 41.75, and 7.99 or 8%. Those will change year to year as well. And over time, as population changes, housing pops up in different jurisdictions. So those do fluctuate from year to year. And so these are just estimated numbers, forecasted numbers that are used for planning purposes. And so this would be over a 30-year time frame for each of those individual programs for each of those jurisdictions. And so there's significant dollars in each of those programs to do good projects over the next 30 years.
So following discussion, Chair Poitras, we are looking for action on this proposed allocation.
All right, any comments, discussion? Madeline?
Hi, thank you. So my question is for the clean technology category, I don't see allocations per jurisdiction. So is that still being proposed to be a competitive category? And if so, why? Because as a steering committee member, I've brought up on 2 different occasions at 2 different meetings that I'd like to see that not be a competitive category, but that those allocations should automatically be distributed to each jurisdiction so that communities can take advantage of that without having to like submit applications to MCTC for that funding. And if that comment has been ignored, I'd like to know why.
So I can quickly, Georgina, you want me to go ahead?
No, that's
So
right. Go ahead, Fred.
So from an MCTC staff perspective, having it as a competitive program actually gives it more teeth and more the ability to deliver projects sooner, and having the transportation authority to have more control to make sure the money is spent timely in projects. Just because we allocate it out to the local jurisdictions doesn't mean that they'll necessarily spend it right away or spend it within a time frame. Having a grant program gives us more teeth to enforce projects to being delivered more timely.
It also provides the opportunity for applicants to think outside the box.
Correct.
So local jurisdictions may not be thinking, about private applications that may enhance the environment and provide for newer and cleaner technologies. Sometimes those ideas come from the private industry as well. And so the funds then are able to be accessed by not just the jurisdictions, but also by private entities that may have unique ideas, innovative ideas to reduce emissions and reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well.
All right, very good. Frank?
Yep, sorry there, pushed the right button. My question is, going back to when we started Measure T in 1990, and the reason why we did and what we told the voters, and that it was to get our PCI up to a 75 so we could lower the cost per square foot on maintenance and get our roads fixed. What percent are we actually going to spend when we try to tell the voters to vote in November on maintenance? And will we be telling them how much of this money is going to other special interest projects and not toward maintenance? And will we tell them what we're spending per square foot right now as opposed to what we should be? And will we be explaining why in 30 years we never reached 75, and explain why we diverted all this money to other projects instead of the maintenance for which Measure T was originally put to the voters as a temporary tax? Will we be doing that, or are we going to obfuscate and make sure they don't know that and just try to push things along? I mean, I know I made that sound negative, but it's to generate a conversation as to why is the maintenance amount so low when the entire goal of Measure T originally was to fix the roads and bring our cost per square foot, our PCI, to a 75, which then frees up a lot of money to do these other things that we'd like to do.
I'll just start and then maybe have the county and the two cities also provide some background and some additional information. All of these programs will address maintenance issues. We have a 30% allocation to the maintenance subprogram. That's a significant amount of the measure that would go toward maintenance projects. We also have an additional 12.5% to the flexible program or subprogram that can be used completely for maintenance or for whatever the local jurisdiction's needs are at the time. So if their maintenance pavement condition index is falling short of 70 or 75, they can take that entire 12.5% flexible and allocate it to their maintenance subprogram. The same with the local road improvement subprogram. When you improve a road, you widen a road, you widen a bridge, you make operational improvements along roadways, there's also some level of maintenance that also occurs. It brings the roadbed up to design standards. And so therefore maintenance is also addressed within that program. Same with the regional, same thing. It's just they're regional roads versus local roads. I'll turn it over to the three agencies and ask them to also further highlight some of those benefits. Jared or Ellen, Keith?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jared with Madera County. Good comments, Frank. I understand your point there. And yeah, I mean, obviously, maintenance is a huge key, and I know we've said it over and over again. We've seen the polls. People want the roads fixed. They want them taken care of, and we certainly want to be able to do that for them. And I guess I would just kind of echo somewhat of what Georgina said there. When you look at this and you see the 30% as the maintenance sub-program, it does appear that there are other funds going to other areas. But again, I think the flexibility with that flexible and the local road improvements allows us the ability to take that money and actually put it towards maintenance. The transit, the ATP, those other categories are going to, obviously be limited to certain things that can be done with those, which I think is why, as a committee, I think, the percentages and the bulk of the percentages going to the regional and the community neighborhood programs are speaking to the fact that this money is going to go towards road improvements more than anything, which is, as you mentioned, is what the community has asked for and voiced their opinions on. So, the regional funding, I think at least the way that it is now for regional funding, it is limited to those larger regional routes, but it does also give us quite a bit of ability to leverage other funds. Example of that is our Avenue 26 project that we're actually kicking off construction next week on. That was a program or a project. I think it's about a $21 million project that we're leveraging. I think we're shelling out 10% of Measure T to match the rest of that money. So having the ability to use those funding in that way is definitely something that's helpful, and ultimately it does go to improving the roads, the maintenance portion of it. So
And one thing that I would add on the regional as well is that there are a number of interchange improvements. The interchanges need modifications. There are safety issues associated with them, maintenance issues. So there are a number of interchange improvements that would also be included in that regional program. City of Madera, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Georgina. This is Ellen Bitter with the City of Madera. Actually, I wanted to reiterate your points with regard to the three sub-programs that they're, I guess I support what you said and your reasoning behind each of those and how they do end up supporting maintenance. Often when we have a like a gap project, maybe where we need to build a road to connect to a missing piece, or if we are widening a road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. That is in a way also addressing a maintenance issue, because now the cars are able to take a different route, or there's not as many vehicles on that 1 lane. So it has that added result of improving the maintenance of the existing roadway. And often, and you'll see here in the city of Madera, the money that we do put on our collectors and arterials have been for rehab projects, even though it's as an improvement. So we do use a lot of it for maintenance as well.
And I'll go ahead and add.
Okay.
Yes, this is Keith with City Madera. I want to go ahead and add in, the flexible sub program does give us the options to go ahead and put money on the maintenance as well, but it should be known that we have more funds than just Measure T. This is helping us to go ahead and do a more of a fuller program than what we might do ordinarily. In the last few years, we've been using another funding source called the RMRA. It stands for Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Program. We're taking that program plus Measure T plus some of our other funding programs to go ahead and work towards the improved PCI. I think we are in fact increasing the PCI right now, and we are focused on it. When we look at maps of the city showing projects that we've done over the last 10 years, we show that a large swath of the city has been done. We intend to keep putting more money on that and bringing the PCI up. This is a goal for the city. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And Cachola? Jason?
Yeah,
Any
I
additional
mean,
comments?
I'm not really going to add anything too much different from what Keith, Ellen, and Jared have said. I think we're all of similar minds related to this. I think it's important to note that, you know, based on what we're seeing here, this 30, 15, 12 and a half, it's more than what was being allocated under, or is more than what's being allocated under the current Measure T program. So we have increased, you know, the maintenance funds available, or not, we have increased. This is showing an increase from what current Measure T is doing, which I think is important and needs to be communicated with people moving forward, because that's what we are hearing, is that we need more maintenance. And I think this is reflective of the input that we've received back. So I'm in support of this. I mean, personally, I'd like to see more money and flexible to be able to move between some of these, but overall, I think it's a good start, and nice to see an increase from what we currently have.
Very good. Thank you. Let's go to more comment. Jeff Wheeler.
I thought what Frank said was quite good, and I would imagine that it would be hard to sell to the public if we only have 30% showing as going to maintenance. And if we have you know, only just half as much going to local road improvements, that's going to increase in the long run, it's going to increase the amount of pavement that we have to maintain again. So I would tend to want to advocate for a higher percentage to maintenance and less for local road improvements.
Well, keep in mind that the local road improvements does not just include lane widening. A lot of projects, there are a lot of bridge improvement projects, conversion to higher capacity facility, which that doesn't happen very often. Some roads just need to be extended, fill in a gap where you have 2 lanes in each direction at either side of a facility, and 1 lane in each direction in the center, and you need to eliminate those bottlenecks at either end. Railroad grade separation projects, and then there are a lot of operational improvements under the local road improvements category. And they include traffic signals, shoulder improvements, channelization, roundabouts, passing lanes, which most of these projects are. They fall in this category. Safety improvements, smart corridors for major facilities, and then freeway service patrol. So it's not just lane widening, it's not just adding capacity. A lot of the projects that are in this category are operational improvements.
Very good. Thank you. Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask a question regarding the clean technology aspect. I heard one of the speakers, I didn't get your name. Well, first of all, I wanted to give Arnoldo a minute to chime in, if he would, on clean technology and the efforts that the city of Madera has been doing in that regard, regarding improved HVAC and our solar panels throughout the city.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So the city of Madera in the past about 16 months, we've spent close to actually over $19 million for renewable energy. 76% of the over $19 million was directly for solar panels throughout the community. Nearly every city facility or every larger city facility now has solar. Some of the other funding went for EV charging stations, including 2 of them that are free of charge to the public in front of City Hall. And then the remaining went for solar street lights, about $1.5 million, which is not included in the 76% previously indicated. And then we've also reassessed the existing solar farm that we have at the wastewater treatment plant, and it's generating, I don't have the numbers, but it's generating significantly more energy than it was prior to our efforts about 2 years ago. So that's just a broad overview of some of the efforts that the city's undertaken in the past about year and a half.
I'd also like to go ahead and add on a couple things that the city has done or might do. One of the things that as part of the project that Arnoldo was discussing, we also did install vehicle chargers in front of City Hall, and I believe over at the Public Works Department. Other technologies that can be used, clean technologies for roadways, are adaptive signal systems. Those can go ahead and those are getting smarter and smarter all the time and allowing traffic to move through on urban streets quicker. We in fact do have a adaptive signal plan to go in at Pine and Howard Road and in the near future, probably in the next probably next year or so. Other technologies include systems to install on transit to allow those to move through the city a little bit quicker as well. There's a multitude of clean technologies that may assist the city and other agencies, and we will be looking at those as time goes by.
Thank you, Arnoldo and Keith. Exactly to our point, that if we receive the allotment for clean technology, as opposed to putting it into this grant and requesting it, the city of Madera is ready to take on these funds. As a matter of fact, whatever we get allocated, that's probably not enough for our needs. We've seen PG&E falter as far as putting in enough capacity for new businesses trying to come in. And so I would agree with Madeline. If we received our allocation based upon the population, as you mentioned earlier, I believe our team of Arnoldo and Keith and our staff, they could put that money to use. And so I would advocate for we to change that to allow for the different jurisdictions to be able to use those monies. My second question, and I'm sorry about being long-winded, there was made mention of a problem with giving it to jurisdictions who might not be able to use it, which I really don't believe is true. I think if you provide money to the jurisdictions, I think they will find uses for it. But is there like a penalty if they're not used within a certain amount of time? Is that something at all that should be a concern of ours? I mean, how long do they have to use whatever monies?
We haven't discussed that specifically. That would be part of the implementing guidelines discussion that we would have later on. it hasn't been specifically worked out that it would be open to private entities. We haven't talked about that either. So we will talk about those things when we get to the implementing guidelines and have further discussion about those. But for purposes of this, we've already, the committee already agreed and approved the allocations that are made in black. And we're really just focusing on those allocations in red today. So any implementing guidelines issues that need to be worked out related to clean technology, we can deal with that in the next couple of meetings.
All right, very good. If there's other questions, let's go to Leticia.
Hi, sorry about that. So there's has been talk about, that Measure T is not the only funding source. I think what's important about Measure T is the investment plan and the people that pay into the investment plan. And that's why we feel strongly about folks having the opportunity to engage in the investment plan. So for example, like Fairmead Elementary is surrounded by many, truck routes, and they want higher percentages so that safety issues can be addressed, because currently the percentages that have been distributed are not enough to see improvements in their community. So those Fairmead wants higher percentages. And I think those things are important to kind of take into consideration, and why Measure T is so important. And even though there's other funding sources, why folks should have a say in this one, because with other funding sources, they don't have a say. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Anybody?
Sorry, one more thing. If the majority of folks, I know we already kind of figured out, or we didn't, we opposed it, but the allocations have, been made. If the majority of the board decides that that's not what they want, and like, for example, like they want to see more clean, more money actually be allocated into clean projects, could that be overruled? Could the previous decision be overruled?
This committee can change these allocations at any time. They're not set in stone until the plan is approved by the board. So this committee's recommendation right now stands as those percentages in black. If they want to go back and revisit these allocations, they can do that. This committee can. Ultimately, we will prepare the investment plan, and the investment plan that goes to the board will have a set of allocations. And then the board at that point, they can decide to either approve the recommendation and the investment plan from this committee, or they can make changes to it.
All right, Mayor Garcia.
Would it be appropriate at this time to be able to make a motion to allocate the clean technologies to the different jurisdictions, or do we have to wait for another time?
No, that's fine. That's not an issue, not a problem.
Then I would so move to distribute the allocations to the different jurisdictions under the category of clean technology.
I would second that motion, but I would like to amend it so that there would be a higher percentage going to clean technology. I don't think 3% is enough, but I do agree that it should be automatically allocated to the jurisdiction.
All right, we have a motion, and we have an amended second, or not? Because that would change the motion. Or are you approving the motion?
Sounds like two separate motions.
Okay.
Was that Leticia who was speaking?
No, that's Madeline.
That was Madeline. Madeline, I respectfully would like to just move forward with the allocations at this time. And then we can have discussions with everyone regarding percentages, but I certainly do agree that is an important part of this. But I would like to see the jurisdictions take responsibility for the funds coming in. And I believe that those jurisdictions can handle that, and as opposed to having to go out and do something differently. So I would like to keep the motion clean. about the allocations.
Okay, Mr. Simonis.
If we're making motions, I'd like to make a motion that we spend more money toward maintenance and bring our PCI to a 75, which is the original goal of Measure T. And once we do that, if we bring our cost per square yard down, we'll have lots of money that we're spending toward pavement maintenance. That is the original reason for Measure T and what we told the voters originally we were going to do, and in 30 years have not done.
Okay, well, we've got a motion on the floor. Let's deal with that first, and then we'll go back to you, Frank. So do we have a second to Mayor Garcia's motion? I do not hear a second.
I second. This is Arnoldo Rodriguez.
Okay, there's a second. So let's go ahead then and open that up to discussion. As far as pros and cons versus the allocation as motion.
I just want to get some clarification. So in the clean technology, so if let's just say, and I'll use the county as the bad guy, we don't use any of it, would there be a possibility for the city of Madera to get a higher amount than just their 41%?
If it's a competitive program and the funds are only going to the 3 jurisdictions, then it would be up to the 3 jurisdictions to either submit applications and compete for those funds or not. The other option is for those funds to just be allocated to each of the 3 jurisdictions based on population, same as the community and neighborhood program is allocated.
I think that's my question too. I want to get clarification on. So if it is a competitive grant, you could apply for how much? Like, could you apply for more than what the allocation would be? Or
no, there's an allocation that would be identified by MCTC on an annual basis, or maybe every 3 years. Depends on, probably not every year, because that's a lot of staff time involved. Maybe every 3 years. There's a call for applications, call for projects, and the local jurisdictions would compete for those funds. The other option, as I just mentioned, is that on an annual basis, there would just be an allocation based on population. Troy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah,
Troy?
That's pretty. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, my camera's this one out. Yeah, if we did a competitive grant, we would look at like a 3-year cycle to give substantive money, but also for staff time, like you said, the burden on staff time to be able to handle the program. And it gives a competitive program gives more options and flexibility and teeth to enforce as well.
Okay.
so we would only be able to apply for 3 years worth of an allocation that we would normally receive. There's no difference in what we could get. It's just one we apply to get it, one we automatically get it. If we automatically get it.
No, I think what it is, so Rod, MCTC would just make an allocation for that year out of this pot of money that would be up for anybody, but you wouldn't, as the city of Chowchilla, only be available to get 7.99%. You could get a higher amount. Is that correct?
So there are 2 options. One, you would submit an application and you would compete against the county and the city of Madera.
Right.
And you may get greater than 7.99% of the funds in every 3 years. Or on an annual basis, Troy would just allocate to you your population share. Those are the 2 options.
Similar to CMAC, how
Right.
apply for CMAC funds and then the projects are awarded based upon competitiveness.
Right.
Right, so then you could get more than your allocation. That was what
Yes.
my original question was, I
Yes.
guess.
You could,
Okay.
under a competitive program, yes.
All right, Jason.
Yeah, so one of the problems that I have with the, clean technology or allocating it out amongst, based upon population only, is that city of Chowchilla is a lot smaller, obviously, than city of Madera and county of Madera. So it's a small amount that we're getting or would be getting annually. And if you look at over 30 years of the program, at about 8%, that's only about $2 million in clean technology. When you have projects that are probably a lot more. So either we're having to save up for 30 years to do a clean technology project or try to pair it with something else, or we have a good application and we apply for stuff sooner and actually get that implemented quicker. And so I would be for the keeping it as a competitive program.
Very good. John Reed.
Yeah, thank you. It seems to me that clean technology is a evolving field, and it's probably, I think it's premature to determine how these funds are going to be allocated. It seems like there ought to be a portion of the funds that right off the bat are put towards determining where the best benefit's going to be gained countywide and citywide for the application of the clean technology, and then have some ability to be constantly monitoring that and taking advantage of the new technology that does come along and is continuing to come along. And that way, then those funds should be used to benefit the countywide impacts more easily that way, and not be something that each agency fights over. It seems like that would be counterproductive to taking advantage of what's possibly could come in the future, especially with gas prices the way they are. We see a lot more electric and alternative types of fuels being used in the future. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mayor Garcia.
When I was first told about this, I was told that this was a partnership between the entities. And now it seems that we're going to compete against each other, and one could get less and one could get more. Why are we going that route? That is against the principles of what we're trying to do here. Remember, our votes today and tomorrow are going to lead to having these discussions with the voters. They're going to have to approve. And if we keep going down this path and bickering about the amount of monies, we're all fighting for the same amount of money. So it's all one pot. So I believe the city of Madera, and I'm just speaking as the mayor here, I believe the city of Madera could handle the allotment that we received. And I do not believe, if we are truly partners, that the city of Madera should compete with other entities for this pot of money that we're working to try to get. We are actively engaging the voters to pass this. And I just think it's wrong. There are obvious different positions about how we should do this or how not to, but I think as partners, we shouldn't have to compete against each other. We should put the allotments in place and let the city of Madera worry about how we're going to spend it. And I'm sure our staff will be able to put that money to good use. Thank you very much.
Okay, Leticia.
Yeah, so I agree with Mayor Garcia. This is a partnership, but I also just want to raise that even if we allot money to the clean projects, well, first of all, we think it should be a higher percentage, but even if there's allotment, like the county, the city, the cities can still apply for money. So I just feel like that's not necessarily an issue, or why that should stop an allotment to clean projects.
And Mayor, I appreciate your comments too about this should be bringing us all together, and we already have to compete with everybody else in the state. Why compete with everybody else that are our neighbors? You know, we don't want to set it up to where it's, we're setting up tomorrow's squabbles today. So I'm fine with your path here.
Frank,
Here we are. Thank you, Chairman. Could someone explain the flexible sub-program a little better at 12.5%? I mean, is that not available for clean technology if that's what you wanted to use it for? Or could we put clean technology under the flexible and let each jurisdiction decide what they would like to do themselves? Is that possible? And maybe a little explanation for that?
Yes, clean technology will really happen in all of these programs. It's not just really set in this one program. These types of improvements are going to occur throughout all of the programs, but there is a set aside that we have identified to ensure that there is a pot of funding that is available for new technology, clean transportation uses. So when you look at when you look at the flexible funding can be used for any transportation purpose, as long as it's directly or indirectly related to transportation. So a city could take all of its flexible funding and allocate it to a clean transportation project on an annual basis, or over the period of 30 years, whatever it decided to do. So that's what the term flexible means. It really means each jurisdiction knows what its needs are. It knows what the community wants, and it can allocate that funding to address those needs.
So does that mean the part you had for clean was the minimum we need to spend, not the maximum? That's the minimum.
It's a set aside to ensure that there is funding for clean transportation. Yes.
Got it. And the flexible is up to the jurisdictions to decide how much they would like to spend on whatever it is they want.
Exactly. Whether it's maintenance, whether it's clean technology, whether it's aviation, whether it's maintenance, a new street and road facility, whatever it is they feel to address a safety issue, to address flooding, to address drainage, whatever issue it is that they would like to address on an annual basis.
all right, very good. Sarah?
I really think that it's better to leave it competitive because clean technology is inherently based in innovation. And by parceling it out, it prevents us from being able to collectively tackle bigger projects that would be outside of jurisdictions. So while competitive, I do think that it pushes us not to compete with one another, but to really look at like what is the best kind of project that could be put forward. And it could always be collaborative between jurisdictions as well. So I would support that, but I would also support having an increased percentage for clean technology from a public health perspective.
Okay, very good. Madeline?
Thank you. Could I get some clarification, Georgina, when you say that all transportation projects are gonna have clean technology components, what you mean by that? Because I mean, I'm just thinking about, for example, like interchange projects that could facilitate sprawl development and goods movement, or Highway 99 expansion, which Measure T was used for. That's not clean technology at all. So I'm just wondering what you mean when you say that.
The streets and roads are going to provide access for some of these clean technologies, incentives to form and join carpool, van pools, litter abatement, clean vehicle power support facilities, signalization that provides for less idling. So new innovations in providing for synchronized signal systems. So there are, it's across the board, the types of improvements that you can apply to a project, whether it's a street and road project, whether it's a transit project, whether it's an active transportation project, complete street project. All of these technologies will apply to all of those modes. The reason that I started out saying that it could be private or public is exactly what Sarah was saying. There's a lot of innovation in the private industry that, and a lot of private organizations are working with public entities, such as the City of Madera, to provide for new technologies, clean technologies, that they're partnering together to do those projects. And when you have private and public industries working together, you normally get a pretty decent project that will result in reduced emissions and enhanced mobility. So if you want it just for the public entities, the 3 agencies, I can understand that perspective, but keep in mind there's a lot of new innovation that's coming out of the private industry as well.
Very good. Matt Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had maybe a question and then maybe a comment, and I do apologize. I know we've discussed this in past meetings, but I just, if someone could jog my memory, when do we true up those population numbers? Is that an annual thing, or when does that occur as a part of the?
On an annual basis.
Okay. Okay. And, you know, I certainly see both from my perspective. I understand both sides, right? I mean, I think if you just simply split this out by population, then, you know, any one of our agencies may have to sit on our hands and wait multiple years rather than, granted, I know it's competitive, but, you know, we all work together and we have continued to work that. So if you split it out and just divvy it by population as opposed to a competitive or an award from MCTC, right there, I could see benefits certainly both ways, right? City of Madera may have a project that's $5 million and they get that all awarded in 1 year and they get to go rather than have to pool their money over multiple years to make that work. Thank you. My main question or comment was related to when that population is trued up. So thank you.
All right, very good. Any other questions?
I had a follow-up question for Georgina in the chat with regards to the, you know, third party or like private entities on clean mobility. If it was an allocation to local governments, couldn't each jurisdiction just contract with a third party or private entity for a project?
Definitely, not a problem.
Okay. And I've got a question. If we went to the allocation method based on population, would that prevent jurisdictions from working together to create some kind of a clean technology project? Because I'm thinking that there's probably going to be situations where the potential is, let's say, a city of Chowchilla, and they've got a project that their allocation will not allow them to complete. But if they reached out to say the county of Madera or the city of Madera that maybe wasn't utilizing all of their proceeds, could that happen to where there was like a joint application?
I wouldn't see an issue with it, Troy.
No, we encourage coordination, cooperation,
It would
going
be
to a,
included in the implementing guidelines.
yep.
Okay.
Right.
Perhaps that would be kind of a middle ground if we put that in the implementing guidelines, because, you know, we've talked about, you know, each jurisdiction kind of doing their own thing, but on the other hand, you know, we do live in the same county, and I think what's good for the city of Chowchilla is good for the county of Madera, and it's good for the city of Madera, and what's good for the city of Madera is good for the county, and et cetera. So I would hope that, you know, that we would look at it that way down the road. And again, if perhaps, you know, there's certain clean technology funds that are more applicable to an urban setting than a rural setting, and vice versa. As somebody pointed out, earlier, technology is taken off in light speed, and what we see today in a certain paradigm is not what it's going to be tomorrow. So, Leticia.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess for us, there has to be a percentage put to clean projects because so far, and maybe this is a question, maybe you can answer it. Like, are there any clean project investments so far in Madera County?
Yes.
And what do you, and what are they?
Dylan or Troy, can you answer?
Just a quick example is we've used transportation funds for electric vehicle charging stations. And some of them have already been implemented. And we are doing a plan right now to look at our readiness and implementation plan to be able to use more. There's a federal bill that just is allocating money towards that infrastructure. And so we want to make sure we can handle the increased demand for that infrastructure. But transportation funds have funded charging stations in our county.
Right. And I think that many times we forget, people living in the two cities forget that there is significant population in the Madera Ranchos, the 41 corridor, Oakhurst, Coarse Gold, Ahwahnee, North Fork. I mean, there's many, including Lavina, Fairmead, Ripperton, East Narcola, Bonita. I mean, there's places all over our county that have population that are in need of clean technology. So, and that's moving forward.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there is no clean technology projects that are accessible to low income communities. And, hearing what Mayor Garcia and Arnoldo talking about the projects that they're doing, it just surprises me that Madera County hasn't done anything and especially hasn't invested in these communities with clean technology that would benefit them. Thank you.
Okay, Michael.
I thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of great points being made, and I see the benefits of competitive. I see the benefits of allocation, and one thing I think of when I think of the clean transportation projects is obviously we talk about things like the 99 corridor or even the 41 corridor, and think of electric charging or clean freight solutions. Because for us, I think if we look at the 99 corridor, recognize it as a goods movement corridor, and think of a way more sustainable way to move goods through our valley. And so I wouldn't want to do anything that limits the ability to partner, because I think some of these, as we do the corridor, I can see the benefits, how it affects Madera County, City of Madera, and Chowchilla corridor, because there's, I'll say, gaps along 99 that we'll be looking at to accommodate cleaner freight, and I think it's benefit to all three counties. So I think where you could get flexibility to partner, because with the allocation, it's a lot of money, but when you break it down, like Jason was saying, to Chowchilla, it might be a smaller chunk, the ability to do a more transformative project, that flexibility. And I guess there's allocation. There could always be a partnership between two of the agencies, but recognizing, I don't really have a stake in the game. We're not a party to the split, but when I think of opportunity for clean freight on the corridor, I think flexibility and ability to partnership is key to benefit the county as a whole.
Keep in mind that this category is both clean transportation and new technologies. So it's both.
Okay, very good. Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I love the idea actually about the partnerships and working together. Obviously, the city of Madera and the Madera County are tied at the hip, and we could definitely in the future look at ways that we could join in projects together. And even thinking outside of the box, if we were able to free up some of the Madera County monies by providing a partnership between the city and the county, then is it possible for the county to turn around and do a partnership with the city of Chowchilla, let's say, or to be able to help them maybe reach their goal in somehow? But going back to my original point, I think this is what we should be doing and working toward the future together, so that we are a true partnership. Thank you. And that's my final one now. Thank you.
Madeline.
Yeah, I have two questions that have arose from the discussion that's been going on. So first, a question for Michael. When you talk about goods movement corridors and opportunities for regional clean mobility, projects there. I'm interested to know what specifically you mean, like what type of projects you're envisioning, and then overall with both, you know, Michael's comment about regional projects and this proposal for collaboration. Like obviously collaboration between the jurisdictions is wonderful. Like we love to see it, but I wouldn't want the limited 3% of clean technology funding to only like to then be divided so that part of it is only for regional projects, because that means even less for communities for local clean technology projects that they've been waiting on for years and years and haven't gotten implemented. So that's kind of like one concern and question I have there. And then I guess lastly, I would just say to Leticia's point, you know, we've had a really hard time trying to push the county to apply for grants on behalf of La Viña and Fermi for the past several years that we've been doing this work. I know I've applied for some, but like we've really had to be consistent in asking for that. So we just wouldn't want to have this be another situation where we need to push and push for the county to apply for grants.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other comments? So yes, John.
Yes, could you repeat the motion again, please?
Yes, the motion, and Mayor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is to take the clean technology category and have the allocations based on population as some of the other categories are. You know, for instance, the screen's not in front of me, but there's like what 7-8% for Chowchilla, 41% City of Madera, and 49% for the county. I believe that's what your motion was in essence. All right, cool.
All right, thank you. I would suggest that the consideration should be given to proportionate based on miles driven rather than population, if we're going to really apply clean technology to improve the environment.
Okay. All right, very good. We have a motion, and we let me see. We have a second from Arnaldo. So, you know, I think we're going to have to go to a roll call vote on this one. So let's go ahead and do that.
Can we repeat the motion, please?
Yes, please.
Okay, the motion is to allocate the clean technology category. In the screen I'm looking at, it says 25,980,000 and allocate it out like transit and ATP and et cetera, to the various jurisdictions based on population. So Madera at, you know, County Madera, roughly 50%, what it would be like 12,900,000 or something. And 41% of the 25 would be City of Madera, et cetera. So that's what the motion is. That's what we're voting on. So Georgina, somebody, I guess, roll call vote.
I'm sorry. Yes, Dina, can you take roll, please?
Yeah, I'll just run through the names that are here, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, and remember, each one that is the representative of whatever that category is.
And no alternate, please. Thank you.
MVP Realty, John Reed.
No.
Visit Yosemite, Madera County, Rhonda Salisbury.
Yes.
City of Chowchilla, Councilmember Palmer.
Yes.
And another member from the City of Chowchilla. Rod or Jason.
Yes.
City of Madera, Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
And an alternate, or another member of the City of Madera, sorry.
Either Keith or Ellen or Ronaldo.
This is Keith, yes.
Madera County Public Health Department, Sarah Bose.
No.
Supervisor Frazier,
Yes.
Supervisor Poythress,
Yes.
Madera County Board of Supervisors.
I think we already voted.
We get more
Uh-oh.
votes apparently.
Sorry.
That's why the mayor wanted this to go to direct allocations, because we're taking all the votes.
We're stuffing the ballot box.
How about someone else from Madera County, planning or public works or?
Yeah, this is the
or Jay
CAO, Jay Barney. We're voting yes.
Leadership Council, Leticia,
We generally support allocations to clean projects, but we don't support the percentage.
Is that a yes or a no?
I'm gonna abstain.
Christina Beckstead, Madera County Farm Bureau. Caltrans, Michael Navarro.
Being that we're not part of the allocation, I'll abstain.
Building Industry, Michael Prendini.
Yes.
MCTC, MCTA, Patricia Taylor.
I will have to abstain.
Frank Simonis,
Yes.
Jeffrey Wheeler,
No.
that'd be everybody, Georgina.
Okay, Andina, so what do you have?
There's 4 no's. 3 abstains. Ten yeses.
Okay, thank
It
you.
looks like it passed. Thank you. All right, very good. So we've got, that was that one category, but we still need to go back and approve the rest of the model allocation proposal. So are there any other questions regarding the proposal?
And that proposal is to take this 57.5% and allocate it to maintenance, local road improvements, and to the flexible subprograms, as shown here.
Right, okay. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, I'll, yes, John.
I believe Frank Simonis made a motion also.
Right, let's go back, Frank, to your motion.
The one I had made was, could we spend more money toward maintenance to bring our PCI goal to a 75? I believe we're spending, I think it's $38 a square yard right now on maintenance. And if we were at our goal, which is what Measure T was for in the first place, we would be spending $2.50 a square yard, which is 19 times what we should be spending, according to what Measure T was first put in place for. And we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that go to that we could be using for other things if we'd reached the goal, but we never reached the goal. So should we spend more money toward reaching that goal so that we're not spending so much on pavement maintenance and staying behind the 8 ball, which is why we're trying to renew Measure T for the 3rd time in the first place. I mean, our original goal was, let's get our costs down on maintenance, but we keep diverting money to all these other projects and not putting it toward what it was for to start with.
Okay.
My motion is, let's spend more on our goal of the PCI of 75.
Okay, I'm going to provide just a brief 10,000 foot level response. And then I'm going to ask Jared Carter or Matt Schreiber to respond as well. A couple of years ago, we performed a pavement management study to go out and look at our 1,500 miles of roads and to see what it would take to increase it, past I believe it's in the high 30s right now as far as our PCI. And at the time, we determined based on the study that we were receiving about 12 million a year in revenues for road repairs, maintenance, 12 to 13 million, and it was going to take 16 to 17 just to stay even at that high 30s. That was also supported by Measure T at the inception. So I'm not exactly sure that even if we did 100% of Measure T programs, that we would come anywhere close to, getting up to that 75 level. We have the 9th worst roads in the state, and because of our lack of revenues coming in from taxes and so forth, we're getting, has been said, we're getting behinder and behinder. So with that, Jared, would you maybe provide a little more input, you or Matt, just if I'm off base, let me know.
Yeah, we'll tag team a little bit, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, you are 100% accurate in your numbers there and your representation of our pavement index report that we had. I think that number gets to about 60 to 64 million annually that's required to get our roads to a PCI of 75. So although I completely concur with Mr. Simonis and the simple fact of the matter is, as you put it, Mr. Chairman, if we took 100% of all of Measure T annually, it still is not enough money, at least the estimates that we see. And I'm certainly hopeful, right? The cities are growing, the county's growing, we're getting more industry and more sales tax revenue generating, that we'll see these numbers increase. But I think to be realistic, that PCI of 75 is very difficult. And I think last meeting we talked about it, and I think that number, Georgina and Patricia, was like $1.3 billion dollars.
Correct. Right.
PCIs to that 75. And so
the other thing I want to make sure we understand is that there was an original Measure A. It did identify a set of projects and programs that I'm sure Troy can review quickly. The last measure, the first Measure T, or the second measure for transportation in Madera County, did not allocate the entire amount of funding to maintenance. It was allocated to a set of programs similar to the programs that you're looking at now. So there was a maintenance program that was identified, but it was not 100% of the Measure T money that was allocated to those programs, to that type of program.
Mr. Chairman, this is Frank. Can I add to that?
Please.
If we cannot reach our goal of a PCI of 75, I don't think it's good that we abandon the idea, which I don't think anyone wants to, but maybe we should consider raising the tax to 2/3 of a cent instead of a half cent in order to generate the funds, because we can't go backward. We can't have our PCI drop each year, because we'll end up spending not only all of Measure T, but a whole big chunk of everything else just to keep the roads from falling apart if we go backwards on our PCI year after year.
And that is something that is being looked at across the state. Some jurisdictions, some counties are understanding that they're not going to be able to keep up with the PCI or ever achieve a goal PCI. And so they are looking at potentially additional sales tax initiatives, but they're very hard to get past the voters. So it really comes down to the voters approving such measures. For us to go out with more than a half a cent, it's a very hard sell to voters in Madera County. It would be a very difficult proposition for us to win So at a half cent, at least we have funds that are going into maintenance and addressing some of the needs. And if there comes a point where the economy is doing really well, inflation is not as critical as it may be now, maybe there's an opportunity to look at an additional half cent or quarter cent toward maintenance issues.
What I'm looking at is that Troy put in the comments, Troy from MCTC, that 21.75% of these funds are all that is actually going into maintenance, which means that we're looking at a really large percent going a lot of other places. And that's why, unless I got that wrong.
I think that was the previous or the current measure.
The current measure. That's the current measure.
The current,
Uh-huh.
so we need to really think about what can we do, because we can't go backward. And just treading water is not a good sell to the voters. They're not going to like us saying, well, we want to pass Measure T and we want it to stay until rescinded by voters to tread water. And by the way, we're spending this much on other things other than maintenance. I mean, we can't word it like that, but that would be transparent. So we have to also be careful what we present to the voters, remembering that the lion's share of voter participation in this county comes from the mountains. And they're conservative voters, and they're going to look at this and say, we don't like this. And if we lose Measure T, we're going to hurt as a county when it comes to everything in transportation. We have to make sure that it passes.
Right. Thank you, Frank. Madeline.
I agree with Frank's point about allocating more of the percentage to maintenance than to local road improvements and the flexible program. Mostly because we hear consistently from folks that we work with that they want to see more investments from Measure T go to like local streets and roads in their communities and fixing potholes and whatnot. And not wanting, I guess I'm concerned that a lot of the flexible sub-program and local road improvement sub-programs would end up going for capacity expanding projects that would create more roadway when we already are struggling to maintain existing roadway. So all that to say, I support what Frank is saying about a higher percentage going to maintenance between those three categories in red.
Okay, before we go to Jeff, Ellen Bitter says, in theory, couldn't all of the sub-programs go to the maintenance at the local agency's discretion?
Yes, and that would be the three in red. So an agency could dedicate all of those pots to maintenance if they chose. I just wanted to get clarification on that.
So for instance, thank you, Ellen. So in the case of the county of Madera, 57% of the proceeds could go to, the entire amount could go to road maintenance.
Right now, the way that the program is set up is we have maintenance. We have local road improvements, which does not include maintenance other than ancillary to the actual improvement project. And then we have flexible. So this, whatever percentage local road improvements would be results would have to be allocated to these types of improvements, not to maintenance.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. Jeff.
Oh, thank you, Ron. So let me try to make a motion, and then maybe it will make for further discussion. Or anyway, so let me move that we allocate 40% for maintenance, 5% for local road improvements, and 12.5% for flexible.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'd just like to hear what that would do, because I'm not opposed to it, but what
it would
Jared?
significantly reduce. It would significantly reduce the allocation of Measure T dollars to these types of improvements for each of the jurisdictions. So it reduce funds from Measure T for lane widening, bridge improvements, gap projects, unless they were to use their flexible funding to compensate for that loss.
Could that motion be repeated? So sorry.
Yes, Jeff, can you repeat your motion, please?
Okay, so I move to, let's see, Georgina, could you put the other slide back up there, please? The percentages. Yeah, there we go. Okay, thanks. Oh, okay, so I move that the maintenance sub-program be allocated to 40%. The local roads improvements sub-program be allocated to 5%. And the flexible sub-program remain the same at 12.5%.
Okay, that's the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, is that you, Frank? Okay, so
Would it, so let me just ask so in the flexible, that can take all of that in there, right?
What do you mean? I'm sorry, Brett.
Like, so the flexible sub program can include any of the maintenance
Yes,
as well as local road improvements sub program?
yes,
Should we give more flexibility for the ability to use that where it's needed? So maybe 35 to maintenance sub program, 5% local road improvement sub program, and 17.5 in the flexible sub program. So so that we don't completely, because there's a lot of things in there. I mean, there's a lot of clean technology also in the local road improvement sub program too. That would be going away, but allow for some flexibility. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
This is Frank. I could comment on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think if we put more money into flexible, that leaves a lot more room for the cities and the county to figure out where the individual needs are and address them year to year, especially since we're talking about 30 years on this one or until rescinded by voters. I think we need to have a lot more flexible room for our Transportation Commission to be able to work within and say, this area needs more maintenance on roads. This area over here, they're doing better. Let's do something else. And I think that would be a better way to go, trying to predict 18 years down the road from now or 22 years down the road from now. Some people don't like that. I prefer that we look at our supervisors and vote them out if we don't like what they're doing, and let our Transportation Commission for the county and cities have the flexibility to do what they need to do, understanding that without maintaining the roads, it won't be any good what public transportation system we have if they can't drive on.
Yeah, and yeah, thinking of the long term, because we don't know what it's going to be like in 20 years. I mean, we could be talking about flying vehicles or hyperloop everywhere. There's no such thing as cars anymore. Who knows? But yeah, so having more flexibility. Sarah, what I had said was 35, 5, 17.5, but I mean, that could even still be 35 and 22.5.
Can I break in here, Rhonda from Visit Yosemite? Why do we have to separate the 57.5% allocation? Why can't we leave that with 0% for allocation spelled out for maintenance, local roads, and flex? Because each jurisdiction is going to know what they need the most.
I would say the reason why we don't want to do that is because we want the voters to have an understanding that their needs and their priorities are being addressed. So if their priorities are pothole repair, maintenance repair, we want to be able to show them as part of the measure, there's a set aside, specific amount that's been allocated to address that cause, to address that need.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Diana Palmer.
Hi, sorry, I'm gonna use my iPad, so my mute button's kind of hard to find. Anyway, this is Diana Palmer, City of Chowchilla. I do agree with Brett. I think that's a good idea. We do need to have enough in our flexible program in order to be able to do the things that each city needs, because the county, the cities, they have different priorities and different needs. And I do agree that increasing that flex program would be good. And also from all the polling that we did, maintenance such as potholes and local roads was the biggest item. So I think we do need to allocate a little bit more to that. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Brett, but I do have one last question because I keep hearing this. And I just want to make sure that when you talk about these three allocations, we're able to mix and match using the percentages on maybe taking a little bit of that 15% from the local road improvements to giving it to maintenance, or using the flexible program and then putting it in the other two categories. So I just want to make sure that that is possible, or am I reading this wrong?
No, whatever the allocation would be for local improvement subprogram, that would be the minimum. That would be the minimum amount that would have to be spent for local road improvements.
Okay.
For the flexible program, you could take any of those funds and allocate them to maintenance or to local road improvements.
Okay.
For maintenance, if it's at 35%, then at least 35% of the Measure T funding that goes to the cities will have, and the county will have to be used for maintenance. So these are minimum, these would become minimum amounts. However, the flexible subprogram, you could use anywhere.
Gotcha.
You could use it for any of these. You could also go outside of these programs and use it for regional, transit, ATP, or clean technology.
So I would say if we did 30% maintenance program, 5% local roads, and 22.5 in flexible sub program, which can go into the really regional, transit, ATP, clean technology, not admin. I won't let it go there. Sorry, Patricia. In any of those, I think it just gives more flexibility down the road. Jeffrey, would you be willing to amend it to that 35 and 22.5? If so, I'll make a second.
I think that's better than the 30, 15, 12 and a half. I think 40% might even be more attractive to the voters. And we will still have some flexibility, but as you've been saying that, and Frank has been saying that what the voters want is maintenance. It's the main thing. And it should be a much easier sell if it's 40%. What do you think?
Jay has had his hand up. Jay?
I really don't have a preference on any of these allocations in the 57.5 because I think Rhonda kind of said what I've said before, but I just wanted to make sure that by changing the allocations, we aren't preventing ourselves from still utilizing all or any of this money to match any other sources such as state or federal funds by having them in any of the particular three categories. I was wondering if maybe Matt or Jared or somebody from MCTC could freshen up my memory on that one.
Well, I'll take a stab at that. So I don't know that it would limit us. I think, obviously the local road improvement sub program would be something that we would most likely be looking to match other funds with. So, if it's a lower amount, we just look for bigger matches. But again, I think as it's been said, the flexible funds could go towards that. So I'm not sure that it would necessarily limit the ability to leverage other funds from how I see it anyway.
Yeah, I would
Thanks,
agree.
Jared.
But you couldn't
Jeffrey,
use
what?
maintenance, though, right? Or could you? Could you use maintenance category funds for a match for a project?
Not for local road improvement
Right. So
sub-program
just those other
projects.
two categories, the local road and the flex could be used.
Okay, Michael Navarro.
Thank you. I guess it's just more of a question for the group. I see the numbers getting thrown around and recognizing like for Caltrans, we don't have a stake in this because we utilize our shop dollars for maintaining, state highway routes. But I hear proposals for 30% and we were at 21.75 before, and we're saying 35 or 40. I know part of it is to see what's approval of the voters, but is there any data to show like what the added benefit of jumping from 30 to 40 or 35 to 40? Because if it sounds like the target fell short at 21.75, so I'm just wondering if we're throwing out percentages or if we know what the result is if we increase it from 30 to 35 or 35 to 40.
Even at the 30% toward maintenance, there's a severe shortfall in maintenance funds that are needed. As someone pointed out earlier, the shortfall right now is about 1.3 billion. So even at 30%, we're going to fall well short of where we need to be over a 30-year time frame.
Okay, very good. Jeff Wheeler.
Thank you, Rob. So in terms of Measure T, leveraging funding, how does that work? If we allocate 40%, if we spend, is it the more that we match funds, the more that we'll get? Like instead of if it's 10 to 1, if we put in 10%, we get 90%, right? So if we're putting in $4 million instead of 1 million, then we'll get 4 times as much in matching state or federal funds. Is this how it works? If we're putting in 40%, we're really getting not just 40% or another 10% more, we're actually getting a lot more than that because it's leveraged fund. Is this right? Can someone clarify this?
It really depends on the program and the funding that you're going after. I will reiterate, as we have in the past, that funding for street and road projects, whether it's maintenance or other improvements, is the priority is for other modes. So that's why it's critical to identify your local measure dollars for local street and road improvements, because the funding for other types of modes is being prioritized over street and highways.
I don't think it quite works the way Jeffrey was saying. You have a project of 10 million, you have a much better chance of getting awarded the grant for the project if you have more match, but it's not relative to how much the grant you get based off of how much match you're able to provide.
Okay. Madeline.
Thanks. Oh, 1 second, sorry. Okay, I just wanted to say to Georgina's point on the importance of having categories for greater voter accountability. That's where I have some concern over the flexible sub program, and I've heard a lot of comments about how, of course, the flexible sub program could be used for additional road maintenance, but I think the concern that we have at Leadership Council is that residents and communities that we work with haven't seen the roads that they want maintenance on, in large part, with a few exceptions, in Lavinia, Avenue 9, that was great. But we haven't seen a lot of the projects that community members want to see get maintenance happen. And so in terms of accountability to community for ensuring that the maintenance happens, that's where we'd like to see a larger percent to maintenance and not as much to the flexible sub program, because we want to make sure that folks' priorities are getting addressed. And then there was something else I was going to say. I'll think of it right now. Thanks.
Okay.
To follow up with Madeline, though, so she's aware that the flexible money can also go toward ATP and transportation projects. So I know that those are big priorities for you as well. So the more money there is in the flexible program, the more available to go to those other programs as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true, Rod, and I appreciate that. I think our concern is just that we haven't historically seen it go there. So that's where I want to make sure that residents' priorities, that there's like accountability in the investment plan to it actually going to active transportation or road maintenance or transit.
Ellen Bitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, from a local agency staff person's perspective, You know, we've spent a lot of time developing long-range CIP plans for our transportation system. And at some point, if we drop the flex and if we drop the local road component too much, we're going to impact those long-range plans. So I think we might need to revisit with our staffs and our officials what impact that's going to have on some of our other plans in the RTP.
Okay, very good. Frank?
Thank you, Chairman. Should we consider, I don't know if we should, adjusting that 57.5 number or that 30% number by 5% and putting that toward maintenance instead? Is that something we should look at or not look at? I'm looking at regional and community and neighborhood. Should we look at possibly thinking about adjusting those by an amount and putting that toward maintenance and leaving the rest the way it is? Would that be better for future planning and still increase maintenance, which is what we have to do if we're behind the 8 ball? We can't not do the maintenance. That's the problem.
Okay. Any responses from any of the jurisdictions?
I'll just note that the regional projects are projects that provide for enhanced mobility between the different communities and their interchange improvements. There's a long list of regional projects that need to be accomplished. So just looking at the list of projects that also need funding to enhance mobility between the communities, the 30% makes sense as an allocation.
Okay. Mayor Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. After listening to Ellen, I think we might have to put a pause on this, but I would defer to Arnoldo and Keith if they've already made determinations regarding how we're going to spend these projected resources regarding the 30, 15, and 12%, and if it's going to impact us moving forward if we either raise or lower any one of these categories. So if you could speak to that, I would appreciate it myself. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it may make sense for us to defer on this for a little bit to talk amongst ourselves. Much of what we have planned and what I think is in the RTP does rely upon the percentages that are generally in the current Measure T program, and we're to some degree we are comparing what we see here to what is already in the current measure program. We like to go ahead and compare to that and make certain that it isn't interfering or going to impact programs that have already been planned. One of the things that we're from the city standpoint is we can support from the city standpoint, that is, we can support reducing local improvements from 10% or from 15 to 10%, increasing the flexible sub-program to 17.5%. We feel that that's reasonable and still would allow us to go ahead and address the programs as we have them currently planned.
Okay. Tricia Taylor.
Yes, thank you. I'm just listening to the discussion and we're going back and forth on percentages, and I agree with Ellen Bitter's comment. Maybe we continue this discussion for next Thursday, have staffs go back, take a look at it, how would it impact your programs, and then definitely come back with a vote for next Thursday.
Okay. So yeah, that's a great idea, and I'd like to have the staffs come back with a firm recommendation that would make sure that they do align with the RTPs and there's no issues in regards to fulfilling those programs. So what does everybody think about that? Any people?
I think that's smart. I think that's a smart course of action.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Are there any other questions on this item? Because this will be our last item for today, since it's 3:32. So it is, we will have a meeting next week, next Thursday at 1:30 for this vote and probably a few other items here. And if there's no other comments or questions, we will adjourn.
Rob, I just, for the record and everything, so that way we don't get hung up on it on the next meeting minutes or something. I do believe that there was a motion and a second on, I think, Jeffrey's item earlier. Do we want to modify that or modify that to table?
There was no second. I was saying that there would be a second if we had changed it to a different one, and we had not yet gotten to that. So
okay,
my second.
I believe Frank.
Oh,
Actually, I think John Reed seconded it.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, do we want to have that modified so that way we can table it to next week, so that way there's no confusion in the minutes or saying that we, didn't follow the process correctly?
Or withdraw the motion at this point?
Correct.
Okay.
Or you could continue the item because the discussion hasn't really ended, and continue the discussion and vote next week as an option also.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Well, we'll continue that item. We did have a motion and a second, and we will continue that to next week's meeting. And with that, thank you, everybody, for your great participation and engagement, and everybody have a great Easter.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.